podcast. My name is Peter. I'm your host for today, and this is a bite-size episode, which means that no discussion, no guest or anything like that. It's just me, just one subject for just a few minutes. But hopefully this can be helpful for us. We've called this video Just One Thing. And what I'm thinking about is the experience of listening to somebody else preaching. And it depends on the situation, depends on your own mindset, but probably it's fair to say that everyone we listen to will be somewhere between amazing and awful. All right, that's kind of the scale. What do you do? What do you do when you're listening to somebody else preach? You see, the temptation is that it can be overwhelming. It can, especially once you're aware of what goes into preaching and you're aware of what it takes to preach, you can start to get overwhelmed as you're watching someone else, either because they're doing such a great job and it's just intimidatingly good, or they're doing such a bad job that you can't even begin to cope, And so what do you do? Well, I think there's actually two things, which goes against the title of this video. But there's kind of a given thing, which is no matter who you're listening to, no matter how good or bad it might be, you've got the Word of God. Be responsive to that, right? So that's a given, I hope. That I've certainly sat through sermons at times where I've thought, well, okay, let me just read this passage. Let me allow the words of the text to do something in me. That's important, all right? No matter how impressive the preacher, no matter how distractingly bad the preacher, this is an opportunity for this passage that you're looking at to make a mark in your life. And so I hope that will be our default setting, that we're always looking for that. And yet there's something more. As a preacher, how do we process the good or the bad that we're experiencing? And I want to suggest that maybe rather than being overwhelmed, we should pick just one thing. So let's say you're listening to, which way shall we go first? Negative. Let's go bad first so we can end on some good news. Let's say you're listening to somebody preach. Maybe you're visiting a church, you just showed up at random, you don't know who they are, and you're just struggling because they're doing such a bad job. There's so many things that are going wrong in the sermon, the way they're handling the Bible, the theology they're presenting, their delivery, the sound system. There's a million things that can go wrong. And so what do you do with that? How do you process that? Well, my suggestion is obviously allow the Word of God to do its work in you. And also maybe obviously, but it's worth saying, pray for them. They might be dying up there. They may actually be really struggling. And just an extra person in the room is adding pressure to them. You at least want to be, prayerfully supporting, maybe giving some facial encouragement if you can. But in terms of what you do with the overwhelm that you're feeling, beyond allowing the Word of God to work in you, praying for the person preaching and the people around you and the health of this church or whatever, what do you do with the specifics of the preaching? So again, it could be Bible handling. It could be aspects of delivery or clarity or organization or illustration material. It could be the way they're communicating, in terms of their delivery, their position in the room, the way the sound equipment's working, the distractions. It could be a whole host of things that are making your experience negative. I think it may be helpful to say, okay, there's too much here. And I don't want to sit here dwelling on the negatives, but if I could give them one suggestion, you probably can't, so this is purely hypothetical, but if I could give them one suggestion to improve this message, what would it be? What's the one thing that would really help? Maybe it is looking at the context of the passage to make sense of it. Maybe it's not using theological terms incorrectly, or maybe it's an aspect of their delivery, the way they're breathing or moving, or a quirk in their personality. What's the one thing that is overpowering, the one thing that's too much? If you can define that one thing, then you can think of it, okay, if I was going to make a suggestion, I'd suggest this. Nobody likes hearing 7 things they've done wrong. But if in a hypothetical situation you had the opportunity to share with them, listen, thanks so much for preaching, and they ask you, well, what could I do to improve it? Okay, well, my suggestion would be this. What's the one thing? And then that one thing, even though 99 times out of 100 you're not going to share it with that person, unless it's in your own church and you have some opportunity to. But if you're a visitor, if you're, listening online, whatever, you may not have opportunity to share with them, but share it with yourself. Take it as a learning opportunity, whether it's delivery, whether it's content, whether it's theology, whether it's a personality quirk, whatever it is that went wrong, even if it's sound equipment, something, what can I learn from that? You see, that's the beauty of what I'm suggesting here. The way to cope with a bad message. Let the word of God work in you. Be sure to be praying for the preacher and the people around you. But in terms of the specific things relating to the preaching, what's the one thing that you would want to suggest to them? Suggest it to yourself. Learn from it. We can learn a lot from a bad example. It's much better to have that one opportunity to learn than to be overwhelmed with negativity and start to become bitter because of how bad the preaching was. I'm kind of using extremes, okay? But let's say that you are on the other extreme. Let's say that you're listening to a sermon and you think, wow, this is amazing preaching. This preacher is so effective, so engaging, so clear, so dynamic, so energetic, so relevant, handling the text so beautifully, painting pictures with words that are so vivid. Sometimes we can get overwhelmed by that. Sometimes that can be intimidating. Certainly if you listen to podcasts and you kind of go for the best of the best. I'm not going to name who that is. But honestly, I think it's just good to have a little reality check in that. Sometimes the people you're listening to on podcast preach the same message all weekend, multiple services, and then they take the best one and then it's edited to make it even better and to make it fit the length of the podcast or the radio show that you're listening to. Don't be intimidated by that. There's a level to what they're doing that is not expected of normal preachers in normal churches who prepare with interruptions and then preach, and that's it. And you move on to the next one. We're not going to hit the heights of some of the sort of superstar preachers. So what do we do with that kind of preaching? The stuff, maybe you hear it at a conference, or maybe you visit a church when you're on a holiday and you go, wow, this place is amazing. In a sense, you kind of want to do the same thing. Make sure you're responding to the word. That's critical. Don't just get wowed by the preacher. Make sure you're responding to the word. Pray for them. They're still human. They might be the most impressive preacher you've ever heard, but they still have struggles. They still have marriage challenges. They still have heartaches in their parenting and opposition in their church leadership. All the things that you deal with, they deal with. So pray for them as a person. Pray for the people around you. They're real people too. So the same kind of basic approach. Respond to the word, pray for the preacher, pray for those around you. But then specifically in terms of the preaching itself, just like the negative could be overwhelming and you end up not learning but just becoming, grumbly and complainy, equally with preaching that's very good, you can be overwhelmed with things that you just can't live up to that. The PowerPoint, the presentation is so professional, and the lighting and the sound and the persona and the stage and all the different aspects of the whole thing, plus the preaching itself, just the perfectly timed comment, the really crafted outline, the beautifully phrased main idea, the personal anecdote that works so well, all the different things. It can be overwhelming. So what do you do? Well, I would say pick one thing, just one thing, and learn from it. Is it the way they finish the message? Is it the way they set up the Bible reading? Is it the way they illustrate personally? I can think of lots of preachers that I've learned from over the years, but I can't think of preachers that I've learned everything from. What tends to happen is you listen to somebody who's really good and you gradually and slowly take something from their preaching. It's too much to get the whole package. I had the privilege of training with Haddon Robinson. I watched him for several years, different settings, in person, on video. There's a lot of things he did well, but I couldn't learn them all at once. And so his art of landing a message with a perfectly formed phrase, sentence or two at the end, that took some focus, and I still don't get it right. His use of pause, I could learn from that. His pace, ability to say so much in so little time and make it feel so relaxed. I certainly haven't got that from him like I wish I did. But the fact is this. I've watched him and I've watched others, and I've been impressed with different ones for different reasons. The way John Lennox is able to communicate is very different than Haddon Robinson, who's very different than a Francis Chan or whoever. A John Piper, a Tim Keller. You've got all these different types of preachers. They've all got different strengths, and we can be overwhelmed by those. But if you say, okay, I'm watching, primarily allowing the Word of God to work in me. That's my first responsibility, to be a heart that is open to God. But as a preacher, I can't help but notice what's going on. And so I'm going to look for the one thing that I can learn, the one thing that can stand out to me, so that I'm not overwhelmed by 15 things they've done well, but one thing that can be a lesson that I ponder, pray about, and seek to integrate into my preaching. That's my suggestion. Okay, maybe you're not like me. Maybe you're able to listen to all preaching and just enjoy it and benefit from it. But if you are at all like me, you may find that because you preach, you analyze when you hear preaching. And because you analyze, you can get discouraged or overwhelmed, depending if it's bad or if it's good. Hear the word. Pray for the person, pray for the people around you, and then as far as those preaching elements are concerned, take just one thing. That if you were to speak to somebody, say, hey, I'd suggest this, or if you're speaking to yourself, I'd notice this. Take that one thing and benefit from it in your own preaching for the good of the people that you are speaking to. All right, so there's a thought. Something to ponder, could be helpful. It's summertime, you might be visiting another church. You can practice there. What's the one thing you want to learn, having watched and experienced that person preaching? All right, in 2 Timothy 1, we mentioned this recently, but it's just part of the same package where Paul says to Timothy, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of God. What does that look like for us? We've received a gift. We've received an opportunity to do ministry, a stewardship. How can we fan into flame what God has given to us? How can we be good stewards of the opportunity? How can we continue to learn and grow as preachers? Well, this video suggests one thing. Pick one thing when you listen and benefit from it. There's lots of other things, of course, you can do to learn and grow and develop, one of which is to listen to the Biblical Preaching Podcast, which you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you if you can share this resource with others, whether it's on YouTube for the video, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other platform to listen to. If you know somebody that would benefit from the Biblical Preaching Podcast, thank you in advance for telling them about it. Any sharing online, all that stuff, it does make a difference. So thank you for joining us, and we'll be with you again soon.
Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate every positive review, like, share, and comment. And thank you for praying for us. We hope you will join us again next time on the Biblical Preaching Podcast.